Welcome to Real Vision Crypto. I'm Ash Bennington. Excited today to talk to Brian Mahoney, Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder at the Alkemi Network, about bridging the gap between CeFi and DeFi. Brian, welcome to Real Vision.
Thanks, Ash, for having me on. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Let's talk a little bit about your background. We set this up at the beginning, bridging the gap between CeFi and DeFi. You have a traditional centralized financial background, otherwise known as working at banks like I did in my 20s. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Many years of cutting my teeth on the CeFi side or the centralized finance side of the house. I spent about just under 10 years at traditional banks and financial institutions. So I started my career in investment banking for a firm called Lazard Middle Market. And then from there, moved to HSBC, where I was basically had about every single hat you could wear at a bank, a crash course into, the financial markets at large. And, really has been sort of the bedrock of a lot of the things we're doing today at Alkemi Network in terms of, ways to make the current financial system more efficient and reap some of the benefits at DeFi. So, I was kind of in the leveraged finance group at HSBC as my last role, and then moved into early stage VC in New York. And this was around the 2016 timeframe. And from there, kind of was what they say, fall down the rabbit hole. That's when the crypto lightning bug struck me. And I actually joined a company in the white label exchange space, a company by the name of Alpha Point. I was there pretty early for a couple of years, saw it go, from about 10 employees to north of 150 at the height. So great sort of crash course into the crypto ecosystem at large, institutional and DeFi as well. And from there, in about spring 2019 is when I met up with my co-founders in New York at the Techstars blockchain accelerator, the inaugural one. And from there, we started up Alkemi, and it's been a fun ride ever since.
So I'm curious about your journey down the intellectual rabbit hole that is crypto and digital assets. You could have had a very successful, very lucrative career as a banker. What pulled you in this new direction?
So for me, finance has always been an interesting topic, and one that's always kind of scratched my curiosity, as I like to say. I really what kind of drew me in was it's the language of business, right? And, I always knew that, hey, I wanted to kind of be the entrepreneurial or go down the entrepreneurial path. But I wasn't quite, in my early to mid 20s, wasn't quite sure what that was at the time. And so, just chose finance as sort of a nice path to do that. And through sort of the process of elimination almost, found blockchain and crypto because I was looking for something more, right? I'm very much a believer in sort of this double bottom line concept. Or the opposite of what some people call the zero-sum game. So for me, the financial markets at large have created a lot of value in our underpinning of, pretty much everything we do in a capitalist society, especially in the West. But I was also looking for a way to build value and add value to the world. And I saw blockchain and crypto as this sort of emerging trend. And that was, for me, the nice sort of launch pad into, really scratching my entrepreneurial itch.
Yeah. It's so interesting, this space that many of us are so passionate about. Obviously, there is still a great deal of challenges to onboarding large quantities of people in this space. Legal, regulatory compliance, user interface, user experience. Tell us a little bit about where you see the state of play today on the DeFi side and what that bridge looks like in the future.
Well, there has been tremendous growth in what we call decentralized finance. And just to define how I think about and we think about DeFi at Alkemi, it's sort of everything or capital on chain, right? So I look at the world and there's this world of multiple chains, which you could it starts in Ethereum and then the broader sort of programmable blockchain ecosystem. But there's also this off-chain world or what we call CeFi that interacts with the blockchain tangentially, right? And I can get into more sort of the details there as we go on in this discussion. But in terms of DeFi at large and where we're trying to really focus on is kind of be that on-ramp or that institutional unlock for these firms to come into the space. And that starts with solving what we call the 3 Cs, which we define as capital, control, and connectivity. So DeFi, is complicated as it stands, right? There's lots, the space moves very fast. lots of opportunity, and lots of these institutions, they see these yields through the roof, or this, exponential growth curve, and peaking at, I think, 250 billion at the height in terms of DeFi market size over the past, year, right? But we have a long way to go. And so, the way to make that, take it to the next level, if you will, is making that much more streamlined connectivity from a connectivity perspective, as well as unlocking what I call the trusted counterparty problem, and providing, the comfort for these institutions to come in a more trusted way, right? Because DeFi, as it stands, some of the beauty of it is permissionless and these open system networks, right? But these institutions are built on, sort of Web2 or more traditional business models, right?
Right.
An LLC or structure that is not built for this sort of Web3 DAO on-chain world. And so there needs to be this sort of middle ground that unlocks these guys to come into the space, because there is definitely the demand. They're wanting to come in, but many of them don't know where to start. So for us, we are very much focused on just sort of nailing that on-ramp experience in a deep and sort of simple way, but also unlocking the power of the DeFi ecosystem for them to come in.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit, because I think that's spot on, and it's exactly what I hear. There's this sort of twin feeling about DeFi when you talk to folks in their 30s and 40s who have been in traditional finance, who have worked in banking. On the one hand, obviously, there's an incredible amount of interest. Smart entrepreneurial people who work at large financial institutions, medium financial institutions, small financial institutions, all see the promise of DeFi. But as you say, there's a little bit of not knowing where to begin. And also, I think there's fear and skepticism and concern. What is it that you're hearing when you have these conversations? Because you're in a uniquely well-positioned spot to hear those views about what's happening in the traditional finance side and how they're attempting to bridge into DeFi.
Well, let's just say that many of my TradFi friends thought I was crazy maybe 3-4 years ago when I said I was going into this, crypto blockchain world and full time, right? And now they're all asking me how to get in. Right. So it's kind of come full circle a little bit, which is pretty fun. And many of them are actually doing yield farming on the side while holding their full-time jobs. So that's also pretty interesting. So, the space needs to open up a bit, I think, to allow for a lot of these folks to come into the space, and if their firms don't, sort of move that direction already. And I think it'll be a combination of the two.
Yeah. Let's talk about both sides of that dilemma. Yeah. So on the one hand, what's their curiosity? What's their interest? Why are they excited about this? And on the second, tell us about what some of those limitations, concerns, and things that need to be bridged are.
Yeah, it's a great question. I like to joke that DeFi and CeFi is a bit like U.S. politics. It's pretty polarized, right? You have the conservatives on one end and the liberals on the other. Pick your side there in terms of which camp DeFi and CeFi belong in. But there's not a lot of moderate players, right? And so Alkemi, what we're trying to solve is to be that intermediary ground and have a CeFi experience, but the DeFi ethos of our products and our, really our company's infrastructure, right? So we're committed to open source, where we have a DAO set up and, progressively decentralizing token in market, but the product experience and everything we do and build for is keeping in mind of that institution grade experience and sort of, allowing these folks to, keep that, traditional experience that they're used to, but have that on chain, right? And that's a big order, right? Because, it's fundamentally blockchains and the DeFi stack, we'll call it, is built in a much different way than what traditional firms are used to. So there's there's a learning curve, number one, that is, and then some of these firms are just sort of getting up to speed right now. I would say, kind of the past few years, there's been a lot of education that's had to occur. And also the juice has had to be worth the squeeze for these institutions to come in, meaning the markets on chain have to be worth the breadth and depth of asset deployment, because, there's 40 trillion plus, depending on what you're looking at, and, the money markets, fixed income, equity markets, right? That has not made its way on chain yet, right? Crypto is still a drop in the bucket from a market cap perspective, touching around 3 trillion this year in total market cap, with Bitcoin being, let's say, 50-60% of that, right? So DeFi is a subset, fast growing, exponential opportunity, but still very small when you look at it as compared to the rest of the global asset markets and some of the big, buckets of fixed income and equity.
Right. 3 trillion at high, down to about 2 trillion now as we have this conversation here
that's right.
in January.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of what we're seeing from these institutions, and we're just taking some of my old TradFi friends, I think there's a number of factors that are driving them the direction of DeFi. I mean, of course, the yields are appetizing. Lots of folks making a lot of money across the space. That's obviously one driver of it and gets people's attention. But I think there's this concept of a few other macro tailwinds that are sort of changing the global economy at large. If you think about the industries that have been disrupted by technology in the past 10, 20 years, from the Facebooks and the Amazons and the GAFA, as we know, and some of these other sectors, right? The ones that have not been disrupted are the highly regulated ones, right? With finance, healthcare, education, government. Those are sort of the last four that, it's their time to come. In finance, you're seeing that now being rethought and really a lot of innovation occurring, and these sort of this two camps of with fintech sort of 1.5, if you will, and then this sort of rethinking things from the bottom up with DeFi and blockchain. So that's caught the attention of a lot of these investors and the guys who sort of are the ones making the decisions in today's economy and today's traditional capital markets in terms of deploying capital and how they invest and grow their balance sheets, right, at banks and hedge funds and private equity firms, et cetera, right? So they're seeing the opportunity and the return potential, and they want to get in on that. In addition, you have things like inflation, the money printing engine that everyone sort of if you go on crypto Twitter, that's one of the favorite topics there. Yeah. Of hey, we're sitting on a bunch of cash. There's the U.S. government or depending on where you are jurisdictionally, that is a big threat to the U.S. dollar right now. So DeFi offers a safe haven in some of those cases, or stable coins or some of the interest products that are out there. And then you just have, also like the COVID economy, right? Sort of this mass accelerant for a lot of trends that were already underway, like remote working, for example, distributed economies. This concept of, hey, can we build our company online? Do we need to have all of our employees in one country or jurisdiction? Or can we set up a team and, have this structure where people are coming together around the world and solving problems at scale? And I think that all these things are in varying degrees of adoption and sort of momentum, but it's pretty clear at this point that we're moving to a world of enhanced digitization of everything, right? And it only makes sense that you have a phone, which is an extension of yourself, right? The next step there is your money should be digital too, and natively digital, right? This one step like a Venmo or a fintech product, right, is not fully there. It's a little bit, sort of like that halfway solution. And so I think they're looking to, move into a world that continues to move fully digital.
Hey, if you like this clip, be sure to check out the full interview and more only on realvision.com/crypto. It's 100% free. Sign up now.